Selfish Giant, which is a new film by Clio Barnard, who made this extraordinary piece, The Arbor, which was a piece of verbatim drama about Andrea Dunbar. And it involved readings from her work and also actors lip-syncing to recorded tapes made with her friends and family. And it sounded like it shouldn't work, but it really did. It was a very, very impressive piece of work. So Selfish Giant takes its title and its central theme to some extent from the Oscar Wilde Selfish Giant. The story is of two young lads, both excluded from school following a fist fight, one permanently, one temporarily. And they're both from families that are struggling to make ends meet. And they turn to the scrapping trade, to the scrap metal trade. And they go to the local scrap yard, which is looked after by a guy called Kitten, who is anything but soft. And they are sent out, basically, and they start scrapping, and they get, dishwashers and pots and pans, that sort of thing. But there are richer spoils to be found in things like power cables, with which comes danger. The interesting thing with the film is, on the one hand, it has that kind of kitchen sink realism that I suppose people think of like Ken Loach, because there is, Kes is obviously in the background of this. It has something else, however. It has a real lyrical poetry. Firstly, the two young actors who are Connor Chapman and Sean Thomas, who I think they're both first-timers on the screen, are brilliant. They're brilliantly directed, and they are brilliant. You believe in them absolutely. You completely believe in their characters. You believe in what they're doing. And what happens is that a rift develops in their friendship, which is sort of brought about by their relationship with the guy who runs the scrap metal place. He is also interested in racing horses, in this on-road horse racing, sulky racing, which is, which looks like a terrifying and, problematic sport at the best of times. And one of the boys has a very strong affinity with horses. The other one is just desperate to get as much scrap metal as possible. And their ways start parting. So on the one hand, you have this kind of Ken Loach, as I said, kitchen sink realism. But on the other hand, you have another element to it, which is partly through the whole element of the horses, which is that the thing has at least the flavour or the reminiscence or the tremor of a Western. There is something which is a wider vista in all of this. And obviously, because it comes to some extent from the Wilde story, it's looking back towards fairy tale and towards, myth and towards legend. And yet all the time it's grounded in this, as I said, social realism. Anyway, here's a clip from quite early on in the film.
Oh, no, not him. You've been excluded, Fenton.
Easy now.
I'm calling security.
Aye. What you doing, Saeed? That's what. Just gonna have to make some money, Con.
Got that bridle too tight on that horse.
Mm-hmm.
Let me come sort it out for you.
You're a bad influence, Fenton!
Go, go, go. Go and go.
I know where we can get some cable. I'll make us go faster though, yeah?
So, if you hear that, you think, you're automatically thinking of sort of Ken Loach and, I suppose Alan Clark to some extent. But the fascinating thing for me is the way in which, very much as The Arbor did, this is very fluid in its genres. It goes beyond that. It reminded me to some extent of Lynn Ramsey and the sort of the poetic realism of something like Ratcatcher. It has this is not a word I use lightly. It has a sort of transcendence in it. Obviously, the Oscar Wilde story, is very specifically a religious allegory, and one shouldn't get too tied up in the relationship between this and the story. Although you do start to find things like there are these huge pylons which you think, well, perhaps they are the selfish giant holding on to their treasures, keeping them from the children with this. Because in the Oscar Wilde story, the giant has a garden and the children are cast out of it. And actually, that's the central theme here: is that these children have been cast out of the garden. They have been dispossessed. They have been marginalised. They are on the edges of everything. They are not able to have what a childhood should normally be. They don't have an area to play in, quite literally. I think that what Clio Barnard does is to have a number of things running at the same time. On the one hand, social realism. On the other hand, myth and fairy tale. on the one hand, something which is very close and very specific and, close to home. On the other hand, something which is gesturing towards, in my opinion anyway, the myths of the Old West, something grander, something wider. And also, she keeps her eye on the detail of the everyday and the, in inverted commas, mundane, whilst also, I think, gesturing towards something, as I said before, which is transcendent. I mean, it's a very, very fine piece of work. She is a really important British filmmaker. She has made something that I think the more you see it, I've only seen it once now, and immediately I want to go back and see it again because, there's so much. It looks so rich. It looks like there's so much in it. You want to go and see it again. Also, it's beautifully, it's beautifully done. The cinematography does a wonderful job of balancing the intimate facial stuff and understanding the landscape. There are some sort of really, really haunting, semi-netherworld dream-like vistas in the middle of this thing, which is so firmly rooted in harsh reality. I think it's a very fine piece of work, and I would advise everybody to go and see it because, we're always sort of looking around for how is British cinema doing at the moment. Well, you know what? It's doing that, and that's something to be very proud of.